a modern podcast where Chris and Mike talk about TV, movies, superheroes, and everything in between. It's time for Superhero Slate.
Hello everyone and welcome to Superhero Slate, the show where we run down the latest superhero entertainment news.
We love TV, movies, and superheroes, so let's talk it all out.
My name is Chris Dillard.
And my name's Mike Royer.
And this is a super special spoiler cast for Marvel's Jessica Jones.
Whoa, did you binge watch it? Did you finish it? We gave you a week.
Yes, we gave you plenty of time. Thanksgiving is not an excuse.
Yeah, we all know you're not doing anything active on Thanksgiving. I mean, I suppose if you're Black Friday shopping, but you're back in time. You're probably back at least by lunch. Sit down on your couch. This is obviously pointless advice. I realize this is totally after the fact now. But
that's okay.
You should have been watching.
This is all on you. This is not on us for once. Normally we do our spoiler cast like the weekend of, but you know, this 13 episodes is quite a bit. We've never done anything like this before.
Yeah, we gotta give you some breathing room. We were talking about this between our normal news show and now. We thought we did a spoiler cast for Daredevil, but I guess we didn't. We just kind of tacked it on to the end of the show so people could avoid the spoilers if they wanted to. So this is the first Netflix spoiler cast.
Yes, it's true. And honestly, this is the first television spoiler cast as well. Everything else has been movies, and I kind of want to plug those right now. So go back and listen to our Age of Ultron spoiler cast, our Ant-Man spoiler cast, our Fantastic Four spoiler cast.
Oh, that's full of a lot of negative.
and now Jessica Jones. We I think 2016 we're gonna have one more spoiler cast this year.
It's a little indie art house film that I don't know if they've heard of it though.
Yeah, Star Wars. It's the 7th one. I don't think anyone else has seen the other 6 though.
Yeah, exactly.
Except us. And then next year I think we're gonna do about one a month.
Oh, It's next year's gonna be crazy for this show.
Yeah, and the year after that's even busier. So I love it. I love it.
Yeah, the show was born out of necessity. We have spoiler casts, and before we just jump into anything, I always like talking about how people watch things. So I want to know how did you digest the show?
Very, very quickly. We had a grand opening for my company's new office space the night before.
Okay.
I worked from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. that day. I was the only one there who was there all day. So the owner was like, you know what? Just take tomorrow off. Don't come in. Rest. And I'm like,
that's a nice guy.
I'm like, I know he's a great guy. I'm like, are you serious? Like, that's Jessica Jones Day. Like, that is the day to do it. So I get up 8 o'clock like I normally would, start watching it. My friend Brian at Comic UI had actually watched 4 episodes by the time I started. I'm like, of all the things, like the guy doesn't see all the movies in theaters either. And this is not against you, Brian, because I know you're listening. But like, he doesn't go see movies opening day like we do. So like that, he was ahead of me on Jessica Jones. I was horribly impressed. So, but I was done by midnight. I was able to finish up by midnight.
Oh man!
So
you just had a fever sweat going all day watching it.
Yeah, I pretty much, I think my muscles went into atrophy from not moving off that couch all day. What about you? I know you didn't get them all done the first weekend. So how did you manage?
Yeah, it was difficult. I'm glad that Netflix kind of mitigates spoilers very well. I did my best to avoid specific sections of the internet because I didn't want anything spoiled. But luckily there wasn't any like massive giant reveals in the show, like just total like flipping on your head, like just huge moments. So there wasn't a lot to avoid. So that's good. But I watched about 3 episodes the first night. And I think I got maybe 1 or 2 more episodes in before that first weekend was over. And I was able to kind of I don't know where I'm going here, but I was able to mix it in with watching other things because I couldn't just capitalize all my time with Jessica Jones. I was able to watch Masters of None because that's something that I started earlier that was funny. Because when I watch Jessica Jones, I want to go all in. I want to watch at least 3 hours of it. I can't just go in for like an hour, then I got to go out and go someplace. But anyway, long story short, I was able to cram in like the last half of the show on like the next Friday night, which was just a couple days ago. We were up until like 3 a.m. We had to make a last minute decision where we're just like, all right, it's like 12:30 in the morning. We have 4 episodes left. Do we watch them now or do we go to bed? Because I'm not just watching one. We're going to get them all done. So I was up late into the night finishing them. So I'm sure there's other people with similar stories out there.
Yeah, and even if you haven't finished it yet and you're listening to this, finish it. Please do before you come into this. I honestly, this is our point where I say there are spoilers in this. Duh.
It's in the name.
So don't be surprised. But at the same time, this was a great show. And honestly, for me to sit down and watch the whole thing in one day is saying something, because I can't sit still. If I'm not doing something, I feel unaccomplished and lame. So I'm always need to do something. So for me not to be on my computer or on my phone watching Jessica Jones intently says something about the show.
Yeah. So it sounds like you got a little bit of your opinion creep out there. That's of course if no one's read your review on Comic UI already. But yeah, you hinted that you liked the show there.
Yes. So my initial reaction. I'm gonna start off with initial reaction.
All right, let's do that.
This is a great show. This is probably the best superhero television series I have seen to date.
Okay.
And as you said, my Comic UI review is spoiler-free Comic UI review. The first post on the brand new Comic UI design, I was pretty excited about that. It coincided very well. Best show, best superhero TV show to date, and that does include Marvel's Daredevil.
Okay, gotcha.
What's your initial reaction as well?
Well, my initial reaction is basically I have to compare this to what's already out there, and it makes total sense to compare it to Daredevil since they're in the same universe, they're on the same, quote-unquote platform, and I think it measures up to Daredevil. I think it's a great addition to this universe that they're creating. It feels totally at home, even though the show's a totally different vibe, a totally different animal. It feels like it's set in the same exact cities, on the same streets. I feel like I may have seen similar locations as kind of like little Easter eggs that Daredevil has been in a couple of times, so that was really cool. But I think overall, I preferred Daredevil. I think when we talked about our initial reactions to this last week, you said the show definitely has its problems, but overall it's definitely way better than any faults that it has, and I would agree with that. But I think basically that's kind of where Daredevil edges it out, in my opinion. I think just Daredevil was able to do more right than Jessica Jones did, but that's just kind of one of those unfortunate things, is when you have these awesome things in front of you, the only way you can really measure it is by finding the little flaws here and there. So by no means am I saying this is a bad show. I think it's a perfect addition. I cannot wait to see the other shows and how they all come together. I'm super stoked. I haven't been this excited for the building of a franchise since we got, the first Iron Man movie. It's kind of fun that they kind of get to do this again and get me excited about the secrets and possibilities. So I'm totally excited. But I think Daredevil still edges it out. But I said before, I think Daredevil is the best superhero show out there. You think it's Jessica Jones, but we both put them pretty much close together. So it's nothing but love still.
Again, it's hard to edge these two out. Again, coming from Marvel Television, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. started off pretty rough, right? So you're wary going into these shows, and what you said was right. They're different. Daredevil is one show and this is another show, but they exist in the same universe, and that's all right. They make it work. They don't feel like you're in two different worlds or two different cities even. I think another thing that you can compare this against, since it's on the digital spectrum, is I think Powers, that we started watching, and that blows Powers out of the water. I don't think this, Powers is kind of gratuitous in what it does, and this was not. This is very purpose and point driven for Jessica Jones, and I only use Powers as another example because they're both written by Brian Michael Bendis.
Yeah, I see where you're going.
And they were both delivered digitally in 10 to 13 episode format. So again, if we want to take Daredevil out of the equation and compare it to something else that we have seen in the similar format and similar vein, Jessica Jones is better than Powers.
I think that's easy to say. Yeah,
it says, because we couldn't even finish watching that. But yeah, so I'm gonna give a little history, or what Jessica Jones is, for those who have not watched it, even though you should have watched it by now.
Yeah.
Again, I keep telling you this. So the premise is, following a tragic end to her brief superhero career, Jessica Jones tries to rebuild her life as a private investigator dealing with cases involving people with remarkable abilities in New York City.
Yeah, and just what a great way to start a series, which is basically we don't need an origin story. Actually, we don't even get the origin story throughout
Correct.
the whole thing. I mean, they kind of set it up for a possible season 2, which I think is a great way to go. But I liked that. I liked watching the show, and we didn't get the origins for powers for any characters until way later in the episode. Basically, Marvel is proving to us now that you've been around our franchise, our universe for so long, we don't need to spell it out for you anymore. We're just going to tell you there's heroes, and we'll eventually get around to telling you how they got their powers. But in my opinion, I don't even think they even needed to explain it. I think they could have just stayed glossing over it, and I would have been fine. But I liked how we didn't have to get bogged down with any origin. I mean, she's had her powers for a while already. We can just dive right into it. It's kind of a new origin story for her. It's her origin as this kind of broken hero. But I thought it played wonderfully.
No, I agree. I think the one we only got technically, I suppose, 2 origin stories for characters, and since this is spoilers, I can say this: Kilgrave and Nuke. Mm-hmm. We didn't get a Jessica Jones, and we did not get a Luke Cage.
Yeah. Well, we didn't even necessarily get a Nuke origin. He seemed to had already been around, but the only origin we totally got would have been Kilgrave.
Yeah, and the only reason I say Nuke is because he takes those pills to get his abilities, and now that we know he takes pills to get his abilities, he's not inherent like the other ones were. And Kilgrave, again, I think it did need to explain that, because I think figuring out why Jessica is immune to those made more sense now that we know why his abilities were virus based, rather than he's not just I'm telepathic, or I can just do this. Like, he has a virus, and that's how it works.
Exactly.
Which how it played out in the comics. So that's the premise. She's a private investigator, and that's a bead that kind of picks up and settles down throughout the whole show.
Yeah, I would compare the private investigation to the attorneying and law portion of Matt Murdock. It's there, but it's not really the star. It's just kind of what he does for a living. So it's just kind of reasons for them to be in the community.
Yeah, I guess it humanizes them, because if you watch the larger superhero films, you don't get their day jobs. Mm-hmm. Tony Stark makes things, but that's it. Yeah. You don't see the actual business side of Stark Industries, or what the hell's Captain America do to make money?
Who's paying him? Yeah. Who's writing those checks?
He's the welfare? Like, whatever. You also get to see where Jessica Jones lives. It's her work office is her apartment.
Yeah,
and in a very shitty building.
Yeah, and that is a very, very prominent set in the show. We return to. I'm laughing just because, like, every time she returns to her place, we never know who's going to be sneaking around in there. There's always it's just like, we get it. They've locked the door, even though the window's broken. But I just thought it was funny every time we go back, just like, okay, who's going to be in there this time?
Yeah, there's definitely, and it's always a surprise, and that's something good. Mm-hmm. But the history of Jessica Jones she is not a character that's been around for 50 to 60 years. Mm-hmm. She was created in 2001, 2001 by Brian Michael Bendis in a series called Alias. Not tied into the TV show Alias. Mm-hmm. And this pretty much is pretty close. A lot of these shots were taken out of that book. Mm-hmm. And she has a history with the Purple Man. The intro, like where that guy gets thrown through her broken glass and it breaks the glass early on, that's the intro to the comic book as well.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So it's pretty awesome. The history is so new that we don't have a ton of backstory to deal with, and I think that helps it not have to give us that backstory early on. Like, it can tell us the history of these characters as we go.
Yeah, but I believe when it comes to the history, this almost made it to TV one other time, didn't it?
Yes, if you listen to episode 45 of our Superhero Slate podcast, you will hear us talk about how this was on a slate to become an ABC TV show in 2010, along with Cloak and Dagger, Mockingbird, and the Hulk to come back. And this was one of the 4 shows. But,
and I feel like we lucked out that didn't happen.
Yes, thank God ABC did nothing, and they let that go, because Jessica Jones, again, I think this is a harder rated show than Daredevil.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's people without limbs.
The people without limbs. There's sex scenes left and right.
Oh yeah.
Funniest story about that I want to throw in here. I was at my comic book store when this came out, the day it came out, and they put it on. And I'm like, you really shouldn't play this. While he's like, no, it'll be fine. It's just violence. I'm like, okay, I've seen the first 3 episodes. Whatever. This guy knows what he's doing. Gets to the sex scene with just Luke Cage, and he's like, yeah, we're gonna turn this off. And I'm like, told you, man. Like, it doesn't hold back.
Yeah.
And it doesn't shoot for shocking. It shoots for like real life kind of things.
This wouldn't be anything out of place on like an AMC or even possibly like an HBO or a Showtime. It's not like groundbreaking like sexual violence or anything.
Yeah.
But it's just would be insanely out of place for ABC.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, so we're glad it didn't go to ABC, and who knows who would have been in charge of it then. And if it would have even tied into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, who knows? That was very, very early days. We'd only had Iron Man 1, 2, and Hulk at that point. So, yeah. So, well, you want to talk about the characters? I think like there's a plethora of characters that I'm going to be honest, I love to watch.
Yeah, and I was surprised by some of the characters too. In some novel ways. So yeah, I think if we just want to jump off, we've talked about Jessica, and I think she'll come up at length in this review. But
I think, man, Kristen Ritter, I hate her face. Like, it's just one of those things.
Oh no!
But no, I totally buy her as Jessica Jones now.
Okay, cool. I'm glad you came back around because I remember when we talked about this on the podcast, when we were seeing announcements of this and seeing set shots, you're just like, oh man, I'm not excited to see her. But I never had that opinion, but I'm glad you came around.
Yeah, totally. That's just, I just want to say I enjoyed her more than I ever thought I would as a person in the show. So I don't take back how I feel, but I'm really surprised.
Oh yeah, I mean, she commanded the role very, very well. I just out of curiosity, I went back and I looked at some of her IMDb, like what else she's done, because I think the only time I've really seen her is in Breaking Bad when she kind of played that druggie. But she's kind of been in some movies where I don't think she's had a chance to really be this badass
or prominent. I don't see her as a lead role. I think more of a supporting character, but she did very well in the lead role.
Oh, she owned it. But I mean, I don't necessarily want to gloss over her, but I mean, holy crap, Luke Cage really surprised the hell out of me in this show, because we were talking about it before we had a chance to watch it, before the show dropped, and we thought Luke Cage at most was going to be in maybe 2 to 3 episodes. Like, we figured he was going to show up and then scoot and get ready for his own show, but man, no, he is a through line through this season like no other.
Yes, and Mike Coulter, again, he played Spartan Locke in the recent Halo series. I buy him as Luke Cage. He is the right build, the right style. Like, he sounds like Luke Cage. Was it you or somebody else said that he has like someone like a goatee wrangler?
Oh, he needs a goatee wrangler. I think I brought that up. His facial hair is like so supreme. I mean, overall, that guy looks good on camera.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, the only thing I hated was when he actually used his Luke Cage line, "Sweet Christmas."
Sweet Christmas.
Like, that felt so forced, like, both times.
Yeah, I kept waiting to see like if he was going to use a chain for a belt at any point in time, but I was like, nah, I think they'll save that for his own show.
Yeah, and they don't tell us his backstory, how he has his powers, which is totally fine with me. Save it for his show.
Yeah, well, they kind of did. I don't know, maybe if you didn't catch it, but they kind of basically hinted that he was one of those kids that was experimented on like Kilgrave was.
I think he was experimented on, but I know what you're talking about, but I don't think that's it. I think there's something else deeper to that. And I think we're going to get that in his show, which he's currently filming, so we'll get to talk about Spoilercast of Luke Cage next year.
Yeah, like I'm sure they'll get more into him, but I'm surprised how much they unloaded with Luke Cage's story. I mean, we told the whole story of his wife's death. We told the story of him getting together with Jessica. We got so much Luke Cage in a Jessica Jones show. I started thinking, like, where is his show going to take off at? Are we going to get like a little bit of a prequel, or are we going to get more flashbacks with Luke Cage's show? But either way, I wasn't complaining. I mean, it was great. They had amazing chemistry.
He did. And I think to get on to the next thing is she had great chemistry with her, girlfriend, Rachel Taylor, as Trish Walker.
Oh man, so this is kind of a funny story, a tidbit. So we were watching the first episode, and they're calling her Trish Walker for the longest time, and I don't remember at what point it popped up. It was either in one of the first two episodes where someone called her Patsy, and I was just like, Patsy Walker. Why does that sound familiar? And I just felt so silly because we even talked about this character in our podcast like weeks back, but I think I just forgot. And I was just like, Patsy Walker sounds so familiar. Who is Patsy Walker? Then I get out my phone and I'm just about to Google it, and I look over at my wife and I'm just like, no, I'm not going to Google it. I want to be surprised. Let's just see what happens. So then maybe we're into the second or third episode, and then it just hits me like a bolt of lightning. Like I pause the episode, I stand up, I walk over to the comic book shelf, I pull out these 5 issues of Hellcat that I have borrowed from friend of the show Quentin. And I look at the cover and it says Patsy Walker, Hellcat, and I put it out right over in my wife's face. I'm just like, read that name. That's who that is. Patsy Walker. That's Hellcat. Then I felt totally stupid because we talked about Hellcat possibly being in the show on the podcast, and I was just like, oh, this is awesome. Like I just loved how all the information just flowed all over me just in a matter of seconds.
Yeah, Patsy Walker is actually getting another comic series starting pretty soon as well for Hellcat, and her history in Marvel goes back to like the 1940s. I think Patsy and Hetty, I think was her friend's name. Like she was like I don't know, like a kind of like an Archie, like Betty Veronica kind of deal back then, and that's kind of like her history. And she didn't come back into Marvel until like the 60s, 70s, maybe later. So she has a big history at Marvel. That's just more recent than Jessica Jones and Luke Cage even. But Rachel Taylor, the actress, actually played in another Marvel film, Man-Thing, from 2005. It was on the Sci-Fi Network.
Oh, man.
And she was also in Transformers 1, and I did not realize that. I'm like, she looks familiar. What's she in? She was in Transformers 1 as the hacker chick.
Okay.
I was like, okay, she's come a long way from Man-Thing and Transformers.
Yeah, either way, she was great in this show. I loved how they were able to get so detailed into her backstory, and they were able to do that because her past as a child definitely ties into Jessica, which is why they're such good friends. You know, and I loved how we got that. Like, she has a very unique backstory, you know, where she was this child star and she's got a horrible mother.
Essentially Miley Cyrus of...
Yeah, but she's trying to be famous and she has, like, her own, like, radio show. And I loved how she had, like, this super secured lockdown, like apartment room and everything. It was just cool. She was just a really interesting character, like how she knows she's human but she wants to be a hero, so she's doing what we've all wanted to do, which is like get super good at fighting and try to be a hero. You know, I don't know if she'll ever end up putting on a costume and calling herself Hellcat, but I think she was a great character.
Yeah, I think one of her greatest moments is at the end of the series in the last episode, when she walks in with the headphones pretending to be Jessica.
Oh, yeah.
And I think her and Jessica have such a great arc from estranged friends, best friends that we don't see, to estranged friends at the beginning of the series, back to best friends at the end. And that just awesome. Like, this show would not have been the same without Trish Walker as a supporting character. Which brings me to one of the more surprising transformation characters, Malcolm Ducassi.
Yeah, that guy was cool.
The neighbor, Malcolm, who's shown as like a drug addict early on.
Yeah, but after he gets those drugs, he gets super fashionable.
Yeah, he does. And but I mean, I tell you what, that guy, I thought he was just going to be like a drug-riddled person that Jessica saves several times, and he might save Jessica at the end or something by...
Yeah, at the very beginning of the show, I just assumed he was going to be dying in like episode 2 or something.
Yeah, he's a very dismissible character until at the end when he... You know, you find he's been under Kilgrave's power for a long time.
Yeah.
And then he gets free, and then he becomes, you know, off the drugs and clean, and then has a support group for other people who were under Kilgrave's power. And I really like Malcolm. Like, I think he had a great arc as well, from beginning to end. And I think he tapered off. He was used as a filler in the last 2 episodes. Him and the other neighbor, Robin. They didn't really need to, like, we saw too much of them when we didn't need to.
Yeah.
Towards the end, I think they were more the filler and the end of the series rather than necessary at the end, but they did great throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, and kind of some of the more other medium level characters. You know, we got Carrie-Anne Moss and she played Jerry Hogarth, which I didn't know this. Apparently, that was a man in the comics.
Yes.
So I kind of like that the gender bent that worked pretty well. She was a very intimidating character. She played very well. She kind of she kind of ended up redeeming herself a little bit by the end of the season, but I was almost expecting her to transform into like the bad guy by the very end. I thought she was going to be a horrible person, but she kind of turned it around. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. So Jerry Hogarth ties to the Rand family. Danny Rand is the Iron Fist, so that's another connection. Iron Fist. And she was a lawyer, which is interesting because we already have lawyers in the Marvel universe we've seen.
Yeah. Oh man, this is one thing that kind of disappointed me. We got Night Nurse in the show, which was really, really cool. We needed that connecting thread. Man, I was crossing my fingers, begging to see some Matt Murdock or Daredevil, and I knew we didn't. I knew the show didn't need it. The show didn't need to be propped up by Daredevil, but I wanted to see it just so I could geek out, and I just never got that chance. So I was just like, now I'm like crazy excited to see these people share the same screen at some point in time.
Yeah.
So,
there's that, and then also I have kind of hoping for a She-Hulk reference, since she's also a lawyer.
Oh yeah.
Like there's several like other Marvel things tied to lawyering that all work together, and they kind of didn't do it here. But again, you're right; it does not need Daredevil to hold up on its own, and I think they played it smart by not including him. Even though, like, I wish I would have seen some paper come across the desk saying, Murdoch and Nelson.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, well, before we get to probably the biggest, most important character in the show that I think is going to take up a large chunk of the spoiler cast, we did have Will Simpson, played by who was it? Will Travel? We were trying to figure out.
I say Will Travel, but
yeah, we tried to figure out how to pronounce his name. But this is actually kind of another kind of interesting thing that happened with me when it came to the Hellcat character as well, because for the longest time in the show, I didn't know if this cop character that they created was just like a brand new guy, just a new character that they brought, maybe just some minor level cop that's previously had a name in the comic books and they decided to bring him front and center. Because I knew of the character Nuke because he's in the Born Again storyline Daredevil, which I own and I read before the Daredevil show came out. So I was familiar with the character, but I never remembered Nuke's real name. Like, I think his
name is Frank Simpson in the comics.
Yeah, and some people were saying that they probably changed his name to Will something because they didn't want to get Frank messed up with the Punisher coming in season 2. I guess they didn't want too many Franks. I don't know. Either way, maybe they possibly just changed his name because they wanted it to be more of a surprise. They figured Simpson was a name that you could probably,
honestly
dismiss.
Knowing Nuke was in the show, we've talked about it before, it didn't click to me until he took the pills.
Oh, yeah, that's the exact moment where it clicked for me, too, because, he was kind of being secretive, saying he needed a very specific doctor, and, he said he wanted back in or something like that. And then I looked over to my wife and I was just like, oh, I wonder if maybe he's like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if he was like a SHIELD agent, or maybe he was like connected to like an organization or like Hydra or something. That would be kind of cool. And then they come back and give him the pills and I'm just like, whoa, I know exactly who that is. And like my wife sees me freaking out. I'm just like, no, I can't tell you yet. Like, I can't tell you who this guy is because it'd be total spoilers. I can't tell her that, he's going to turn into a villain, basically, like right there. So I kind of had to wait until he started doing, like, really shady stuff like killing cops and shooting them in the head and burning them alive before I could say, like, oh, yeah, that's totally a villain. His name's Nuke. He's crazy. They give him pills. They drop him in the Hell's Kitchen, and he blows shit up with, like, helicopters.
So the funny story for this is, like, when you see the cop early on under, his Kilgrave's control, I kind of wrote him off. I'm like, oh, he's not going to come back. He's just
exactly.
One of those, but he kept coming back with that survivor's guilt thing. And like, that's like, I'm really impressed in how they did that with him, making it seem so subtle to become to the forefront.
Yeah, it was a great character arc, and I love knowing that, like, oh, they can bring normal people in and make them good people. Usually you kind of expect cops in these shows to just be crooked automatically, especially since Kingpin in the previous Netflix show like owned half of the police force, it seemed. So I love that we kind of had this good guy. Yeah,
and then by the end, he also looks a lot like Chris Evans. Which gives it that Captain America, because Nuke is, like the Vietnam era Captain America.
Yeah.
And he had that blonde hair, and like he just looked like Chris Evans. So I'm like, that was a second tell. I'm like, man, he looks a lot like somebody I know.
Yeah, and it was a cool way to tie into how Jessica Jones may have gotten her powers. From this organization that basically makes and controls Nuke. Could be the same place that makes Jessica Jones.
Yes, and that before we get into that, we'll come back to that. That's actually something I want to talk about later. But
Okay.
we want to get into the villain of this series.
Yeah, he is the big reason I think why this show is head and shoulders above a lot of things out there.
Yeah, so this show presents David Tennant as Kilgrave, probably the best villain I've seen to date in Marvel, because he is the most intimately connected villain to the main character that we had seen. This is why Loki works so well, because he grew up with Thor. This is why Kilgrave works, because he is kind of in love with, Jessica Jones.
Yeah, and I also think he works well because he doesn't have any sort of crazy evil scheme. He doesn't have plans to take over the world. He's just kind of a psychopath. He was a child that grew up with these powers, and I loved how throughout the show you actually started to sympathize with him a little bit. It's just like, oh, he's not an inherently bad person. Like, he didn't start out that way. He wasn't born evil. Like, these powers, it makes sense why having this power would turn you into an evil person.
Yeah, so he grew up getting everything he wanted. Like, he wouldn't know what to do otherwise if he couldn't. And there are multiple attempts to create immunity to his powers and like subdue his powers, and like I think those were really cool. But like honestly, like I'm glad to see they evolved his powers by the end as well. Like to become stronger and do more with it. I really like Kilgrave. David Tennant has that ability to like have some charm and then like snap into like the crazy. Like one of my favorites is like when he's sitting in the restaurant, he's like, everybody shut up, and they all just like go quiet.
Yeah, it was really cool to see those powers come to the screen, because in the comic book, you're writing it down. The characters that you're drawing don't necessarily have to act how they're being controlled, but I love how these actors were able to embody what it's like to be controlled by Kilgrave, because it's not like he's totally controlling your mind. He's giving you these suggestions, so it's like you're still in there, and you can't describe why you want to do these things, but you just do them. And I loved how that was portrayed. Like, even though these people, like the servants in the crazy creepy house that he recreated, were there and they were being paid, you could still see the terror on their faces when they didn't want to do these things, even though they were commanded to. So I love the whole like terror aspect of it. It was always intimidating in the first half of the show whenever a character came across Kilgrave, because you knew that they were fucked. Like if they didn't get out of there, they were in his control, and something evil was going to happen, which is one thing that I really loved about his character is he did not hold back. When he did something evil, he did something really evil.
And he was very creative about it as well. It wasn't just like, oh, shoot yourself. Right? He was like, okay, put a bullet in your head.
Yeah.
Like the way he worded things made it much more creative than just simple, like kill yourself or something like that. And like he's like, okay, he's like, when he told Will Simpson, he's like, leave. He's like, no, that way, and pointed towards the balcony. And that's what made him jump. He didn't tell him to jump. He told him to leave, but go out that way. And one of my favorite lines is at the end, whenever Trish Walker reveals herself to him, and he's like, "It's Patsy!" Like, it's bloody Patsy. And then like that, I don't know. David Tennant, as being a Doctor Who fan, is always good in that show, but he could always channel a dark side. And this one, he was dark, but he was able to channel a good side or funnier side. At times when he needed to.
Yeah, I really loved, this is funny, I really loved being someone that doesn't watch Doctor Who, because when I went in, now I will only ever associate David Tennant with first being Kilgrave, which I think is awesome, because I'm just not a Doctor Who person. So man, like David Tennant knows his way around a set. He knows his way around dialogue. He was just great. I mean, he was an amazing character. And he scared me. He legitimately scared me at the beginning of the season when he was very mysterious. So I thought that ended up being an amazing villain.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I liked him better than Kingpin, to be honest, because I think I sympathize more with this guy than Kingpin.
Yeah, exactly.
Mostly because, again, he wasn't really trying to do anything bad. He just wanted Jessica Jones to love him back, but he couldn't tell her to do it.
Yeah.
Anymore.
Yeah, but I think Kilgrave and this character is a really good way to kind of segue into the next part of our spoiler cast. We're going to be talking about like reactions, and we call it the good and bad and the ugly, but I don't think there's much bad or much ugly.
Yeah.
But since David Tennant and the Purple Man is kind of like the pinnacle of the show, I think when we start to see like problems in the show or things that concern me or I worry about in the future, it kind of comes around his character. So I'll just go ahead and start off in saying he was such a great part of season 1. I'm curious what they do without him in season 2. You know, Daredevil had the luxury where the Kingpin was the main baddie in the first season, but I feel like he was spread a little bit more evenly. I guess not evenly. He was kind of more like just popped in and out, and he was kind of the influence of other crime that was happening. So Daredevil could deal with other bad guys and other problems that wasn't directly related to Kingpin. So you could kind of see how he's going to go in other seasons. But with Jessica Jones, like when you think this show now, you automatically think Kilgrave. You think the mind control component. So I'm kind of curious where they're going to go in the future without David Tennant and without Kilgrave, because I was surprised that they killed him. Like I was expecting they were talking about justice a lot. They were talking about we're not the ones who get to decide that. I was surprised that they killed him. Because,
see, that sounds more like you're talking about Daredevil when it talks about, I don't feel any justice in this show because I feel like Jessica, like they killed people in this show quite a bit.
Yeah, well, with the justice line, I was kind of saying like they several times said we're not the ones who get to decide whether he lives or dies. Obviously now it's Jessica who gets to decide. So, you know, I was kind of expecting her to kind of take up the mantle of hero by the end and keeping him alive. But, you know, once you get to the 13th episode, you realize how dangerous it is. It makes sense that they had to kill him. So that's not my problem. I'm just saying I was surprised that they killed him, which was cool.
Well, something we didn't talk about was the Hope storyline. The girl that came to Jessica and drew her back into the Purple Man scenario because she was controlled by him. She was the reason he wasn't killing him the whole time because she needed him to clear Hope's name.
Yeah, which I think was a really, really good plan, because early on in the show I was just like, you guys can get close enough to him to just brain him. You can shoot him in the head. Why don't you just do that? And then I realized, oh yeah, because they want to save Hope. You know, she's innocent. They can't explain all of these events that no one will ever believe if they just kill him, which I kind of liked that thing. It was like an impossible problem to solve. How do you prove a mind reader? And at the beginning of the show, I was just like, yeah, how do you do that? I really hope they show me how they do that because I don't know. This is a really, really interesting conundrum.
Yeah, so when she was out of the picture, that's when the killing could come back in. And that was totally okay with that. I think something I didn't like, which answers your question, is that they have to use IGH in the second season. That is the villain. IGH is the villain.
Yeah.
And I hated that they introduced this so late in the show. Patsy's mom was one of the most shoehorned characters I ever felt in the show.
Yeah, I could see that.
That is a great season 2 narrative to delve back into her past. Like, for season 1 was her past with Kilgrave. Season 2 is her past with Patsy. And dealing with, this life growing up within the Star household, not being really wanted there, like just being kind of purchased, really, for fame. And IGH kind of just popped up there at the end. I'm like, why is this here? Like, we don't even know if we're getting this season 2. They've not announced it. Daredevil was announced pretty quick, I feel. And I don't know. I have faith for Jessica Jones season 2. I do. But we've talked about this, the production schedules going into the Defenders.
Yeah, and it's just like, where do you fit Jessica Jones? I mean, we've talked about in the podcast about how there's ideas of this second, phase 2 of Netflix where they're bringing in new characters and new shows. And it's just like, it's kind of unfortunate. It's like, it would be cool to see other characters get a 13 story arc show, but it's like, I really, really liked these other characters. I liked being in this other character's basically life, and I don't want it to just go away. So, it's kind of a bittersweet type of thing.
It really is, and that's something maybe a season 2 would come in, maybe after like the Defenders, maybe she can go looking for IGH and maybe have more team ups, I guess, afterwards, like bringing Daredevil into some episodes, Iron Fist into others. But that's just something to think about. But that IGH is one of the complaints I have, and so is her, Patsy's mom. That's one of my bads of the thing. But one of the greats of the thing I really enjoy is that this this is where I hold it over Daredevil. This is what beats it out on Daredevil for me. Daredevil is episodic. It is very much, you watch an episode, you're done. You watch the next episode, you're done, right?
I would totally agree with that, 100%.
And that ties into like how the Kingpin, Daredevil only popped up when he had to defeat something that was going on. Jessica Jones is essentially a long movie where it, from beginning to end, it's like, what, 2 weeks or something like that? Maybe a month? Like, it goes really, really quick, and where one ends, the next one picks right up.
Yeah, and I thought they did a great job because it never felt like they were trying to stretch one storyline. I was really surprised that we never. I mean, if there was any filler episode in this, it would have been the one where she was following around that that jewelry designer person who wanted to just kill superheroes because they were bad.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I mean that kind of story kind of stood out as something pretty different. I ended up liking it. I thought it was kind of cool that they brought in a character that just wanted to kill superheroes, and how Jessica Jones just like, no, you can't put your shit on me, which I thought was kind of cool. So that one kind of stood out, but I never really felt like a filler episode. But yeah, the whole season, I think, just kind of goes into what we talked about at the very beginning, is this show has a totally different vibe to it. You know, it's very different. There's a very constant through line. But at the same time, I think I want to bring up the kind of the place where I started to see some of the flaws in the show. And that was kind of once they captured Kilgrave. So once they finally got him in that hermetically sealed container, I thought the show kind of spun its wheels a little bit. And I thought some of the decisions that they made, I wasn't fully on board for, but it didn't totally take me out of it. So, and I think it really comes down to Kilgrave's parents, honestly. I thought it was a little too convenient that his parents just happened to be in New York following him around. You know, it was a little too coincidental. You know, it's already a pretty big coincidence that she finds Luke Cage after killing his wife, and Luke Cage also happens to be a superhero. You know, I can let that go. That connection feels natural. But, you know, just, the parents just conveniently happened to be there. I didn't feel like a lot of detective work went into finding them. And then when they got there, they kind of started unloading more information about his superpowers, which I thought we didn't even necessarily need. You know, I thought going as far as saying it's something that he can do to people in the air was great. But when they started delving down into the deep, like, it's a virus. We can find a cure for it. And then we can spray it on ourselves, and, you know, we can find a way to manipulate it. But now he's going to reverse engineer it to make himself stronger. I just thought it kind of changing the show from something just kind of interesting to just more technical, and I didn't really like that. I wish it could just remain more vague.
Well, see, that didn't bother me so much is because that's just more failed attempts on everyone's behalf. Like, this is a show of failed attempts. Like, and when you're like, oh yeah, she's finally going to do something awesome, like, bam, like she's slapped in the face. Like, Jessica Jones, she didn't feel like she was coming out on top at all. And I think Daredevil's the same way. Like, you never feel like they're really getting on top because something just as bad is happening to them at the same time. And, like, the cure, he sprayed the cure, but it didn't work. The fetus thing was really weird. I agree. I'm glad that paid off later.
Yeah, and actually it did pay off later, but it was kind of a hard connection to follow. So I didn't realize that Kilgrave was using the stem cells from the fetus to improve his powers until someone explicitly said it in like one of the last episodes. I don't know who was monologuing it or who was saying it's just like but yeah, someone actually had to like say like, he found that fetus and used it. I didn't pick up on that. So that it got a little messy there. And I think that's just kind of if you have to I think it's a little worse than a nitpick, but there's so much good in the show that I can easily overlook it.
Yeah, I think this show doesn't lose steam like Daredevil did, and I give it that over Daredevil.
Yes, some people did say that those like episode like 10, 11 of Daredevil did kind of like slow down. I never personally felt it, but some people did say it was there.
Yeah, I felt to me, I felt it in this one. I didn't. I guess it could be like how you're watching it. So I was able to watch it all in a row. I felt better about it. Daredevil I didn't get to. I had to sporadically choose. But I mean, honestly, for a good, bad, and ugly, like, there's great things. Like, I enjoyed the villain. I enjoyed the character. I enjoyed the scenarios. The bad has some really kind of shoehorned in plot points towards the end. But there's no ugly. I don't think there's any ugly.
Yeah, there's nothing that's really going to detract this show from being held up there as amazing. So, I guess we can go into like our final thoughts on the show, and I think my biggest one is this show did something for me that I hadn't felt in a while, and I brought it up earlier, where I was so excited to see where it was going to go. I was kind of like, I was on the edge of my seat towards those last couple episodes because I was just like, oh, is Daredevil going to pop up? We see, finally we get to see Night Nurse. That's so cool. I love seeing the little threads to where things start to get connected to the other shows and building this universe. And that made me really excited, because I didn't really know where it was going to go. We know where the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to go for years because they've announced it all, which is one thing that I've talked about on the podcast that I'm not a big fan of. Because we know it's going to culminate in this two movie Avengers insaneness. We even know the title of the Avengers movie, so we know it's going to deal heavily with Thanos. I don't know what's going to happen in this Netflix show. We don't even have a whole lot of news on Iron Fist yet, so we don't really know where it's going to go. We don't know what they're going to do with Luke Cage. So I really like the unknown, and I can like it because the shows are good. They've proven themselves with two shows. We knew it would probably be a little easier to pull Daredevil off because he's super cool and he has awesome action scenes.
Daredevil, you just had to beat Daredevil 2003.
Yeah, exactly. So we knew Daredevil was going to be a little easier to do, but I had reservations about Jessica Jones. I mean, I didn't know how interesting her character was going to be. I didn't think she had as cool a set of superpowers. So I think I'm just really, really excited to see where it's going to go with the Defenders, and I love this edition. And yeah, it made me really excited.
Yeah, you're definitely not alone. Jessica Jones was not my second pick. I figured it would be the last one they added to the Defenders, since Luke Cage and Iron Fist, are pretty prominent. You know them. And I agree with you that, honestly, they could have chosen the comic book and followed it, but Jessica Jones doesn't have years and years of stories and backstory to pull off of. So anything they did was definitely a surprise in this, and that's something awesome. Daredevil, I mean, we know Daredevil. They even showed us his costume before the show aired, like what he would get at the end of the show.
But I think I avoided that.
Well,
but
so
it was hard. It was hard to avoid.
Yeah, so like they knew, like everyone kind of knew where that was going. This one nobody knows. Like she didn't have a costume. She's not evolving into, like Iron Man didn't evolve. Like she's not like Iron Man evolved from a gray suit to a red and gold suit. So it's hard to see where she's going. And I think she was This is the most personalized, the most personal, intimate show Marvel has created to date, and that's one of its strengths. And I really look forward to her addition to the Marvel universe and how great she is, and how that will change based on this show. So that's really my final thoughts on this. I mean, do you have anything else to add? I mean, I can't gush enough about this without going on for hours.
Yeah, I think basically this Defenders culmination is going to be something amazing. I think that there's a possibility that this Defenders movie miniseries, whatever they're going to end up doing with it, could really hold its own up against any Marvel movie out there. I love getting connected to these characters, and I'm super stoked for more. I can't wait until we get some Iron Fist news. I can't wait until we get to see Luke Cage trailer. The first thing I did the second I finished this is I went online and I started looking up Easter eggs right away. I wanted to know everything about the show because I'd been avoiding everything until I finished it. Someone pointed out something that I think would be kind of cool. I hope it's true. When the two guys come to repair Jessica's door, and they're kind of having a banter back and forth, there's someone in the background in the hallway that walks out of a door with something yellow in his hand, because he's in the background. It's all blurred, and he has something yellow in his hand. He gets in the elevator. He puts the yellow thing in his hand on his head to where it looks like a mask, which would kind of be Iron Fist's mask. Now, whether this is actually him or not, or it's just kind of a nod to the Iron Fist character, I think it would be really cool. Someone pointed to how Daredevil goes and sits down in one of the precinct offices or in his show, and he sits next to a character that looks alarmingly like Jessica Jones. She has her head turned, and I think her hood might be up, so you can't really tell if it's really her. But I kind of like these little nods, so I'm super excited to see more. I want to delve more. I just want more. I want to jump more into it. We had the same thing. We talked about the exact same thing when Daredevil was over. We just wanted the next one already.
Yeah, and I honestly would not be surprised if they announced a sequel being the first thing post Defenders. But maybe we might get one beforehand. Who knows how many of these they want to crank out a year now?
Yeah, we don't know, but I think when we get this team together, their chemistry is going to be great.
Yes, totally. So all in all, I think this is a great sophomore outing for Marvel and only gives me more hope for how they are going to go forward. I don't think they're going to rest on their laurels. I think they're just going to go up and up and out the door.
Yeah, it's a great show. If you like this Spoilercast and you want to reach out and listen to more, we got a whole other podcast where we talk about news every week over at superheroslate.com. So just head on over there and you can subscribe to our feed and you can get all the Spoilercasts, episode news. Sometimes we have movie nights that pop up in the feed. It's an awesome feed. I suppose I'm biased, but I'm subscribed.
Are you? Me too, actually. Sometimes I listen to us in my car. It's pretty bad. But yeah, that's really about it. I mean, awesome show, great. I hope you guys go get Netflix and watch it, and give us your feedback. Let us know what you think. Yeah, usually we wrap these shows up a little bit nicer, but we've been talking about this one amazing show. Now I'm just like, I kind of want to go start rewatching Daredevil so I can come back around and rewatch Jessica Jones again. Yeah, it's true. Honestly, you're gonna hate me for this. I want these to come out on DVD, because again, I like to sometimes it's hard to if someone's playing a game on the Wii U or the Xbox, and I want to watch it, you gotta manage your bandwidth. Oh yeah, that's awful. I really want to. Anyway, so we'll catch you guys next week. Don't forget to check us out. Do you want to plug where we all are? Or? Yeah, we might as well. If they want to find out when eventually you possibly get those DVDs, where can they find you? Mine's at Valdan, VALDAN on Twitter. Also, Comic UI, spoiler-free review of Jessica Jones on Comic UI right now, and that we're on Facebook and Twitter as well, so you can look us up there. Where can they find you, Mike? Well, they can follow me at Mike Royer Design on Twitter or Instagram, and you can also read my webcomics over at pickledcomics.com. My latest one right now is a Jessica Jones comic that you will only think is funny and only understand if you watch the show. So I'm assuming if you listen to the Spoilercast, you watch the show. Hopefully you're not masochistic and running into spoilers like a madman. So, but yeah, as always we say on our normal podcast, you can check us out at superheroslate.com. That's where we have the links to all the places that we're at. Please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. It helps us get in front of more eyeballs, And if you're a super fan of the show, share us with a friend. We know you got friends out there who like superhero stuff. So if you think they'd like to listen to us be stupid and talk about nerdy things, that's right. Give us a shout out over there. Yeah, so sounds great then. I guess we'll catch you guys next week on our episodes. All right, and stay tuned for that little indie film, Star Wars. We'll be doing a spoiler cast for that one. Our next spoiler cast is in fact Star Wars. Good call. All right, we'll see you then. All right, bye everybody. Bye.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe.